Mike Pence has now argued that we need to be sending U.S. troops to Ukraine. This is an article that we have here from NTD. I'm not sure what NTD is exactly. Never heard of the organization. I apologize to NTD for that, but it's the first article that popped up, so that's what we're going with. Quote, Mike Pence says U.S. troops may have to fight if Ukraine does not repel Russia. Quote, former Vice President Mike Pence warned this week that if Russian forces are not repelled in Ukraine, U.S. military service members may have to step up to the fight. Sorry. Quote, I'm convinced that if the Ukrainian army doesn't stop and repel that Russian invasion, it's not going to be long before that Russian army crosses the border, that our men and women in uniform are going to have to go and fight under our NATO treaty, Mr. Pence said during a town hall style interview with News Nation on Wednesday. I truly believe it. That's rather odd to me, considering that, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, although I guess as this article is sort of inferring here, it could be that he's saying that if they continue to cross into Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, I do not see that happening. I could be wrong. We never know nowadays. I could be wrong. But as far as I can tell, at this point in time, that is all that Putin wants is Ukraine. And with the way that things are going, we may just have to let him have it. We may have to. Especially when you start to look at some of these statistics here. Quote, earlier this year, it was estimated that between 9,000 to 16,000 civilians, just civilians, have been killed in the war in Ukraine, with the total death toll reaching upwards of 354,000, according to Reuters. Do we really want to send our troops to go fight that fight? Do we really? I don't want to. I'm quite positive that at least half the country at this point in time does not want that to happen. I could be wrong, but as far as I'm concerned, this was all started by the United States wanting to get Ukraine into NATO so that they could very likely place missile bases there and use it as a strategic point to either fight off Russia in case they decided to do something unruly. But perhaps that's not the case at all. As far as I can tell, the UN has had some form of policy to take over every single Western country and move eastward for decades at this point. For decades. And I don't see... I personally, I don't see Russia stopping just at where they're currently being held in Ukraine. If Trump were to go into office tomorrow, the land that they've taken, they're going to want all of that land back. They're not going to say, okay, we'll just stay right here where we're at. We won't advance any farther. I think personally that Russia has no choice but to take all of it back. And if the United States is actually going to start sending troops here, it gets us into really shady territory, because at what point is Putin's back up against the wall? At what point is that going to happen for Putin? Or at least at what point is he going to feel as if though his back's against the wall? Because he does have nuclear warheads. He has the second largest stockpile of nuclear warheads on Earth. And sure, this may not have been Russia's best fight, but historically, this is how they have fought every war since World War II, and they've been a force to be reckoned with. A lot of people think that Russia is nothing to really worry about despite their nuclear warheads because of how they've been dealing with this war. But you have to realize that the only reason that Ukraine stood any chance at all is because of this next quote here. They have received $135 billion in Ukraine as of August 5th of this year. $135 billion. And they're not just receiving those funds. They're also, part of those funds anyways, are going towards state-of-the-art weapons that the United States has. These are weapons that Ukraine never had before this war started. they never would have got their hands on had this war not started. They would have never had the funds to fight this war had America not jumped into the mix, and not to mention the fact that the United States is undoubtedly giving them immense amounts of intelligence through our spy planes and likely satellites and things of that nature, whether it be hacking into sat phone calls, whether it be having access to computers in Russian government buildings, etc., etc., etc. The United States undoubtedly has been feeding them priceless intelligence this entire time that has helped aid them in the war. And so to act as if though Russia is no threat to us whatsoever, the Ukrainian troops, well, not all of them, but a good portion of them, have got at least some form of westernized, Americanized military training to fight this war, on top of the $135 billion, on top of the state-of-the-art weapons. And Russia is still fending them off, and as far as I can tell, they are winning. They are winning. If they weren't winning, Mike Pence would not be saying that we may have to send U.S. troops there. I say, at this point in time, let Russia take it. But the people that we have in power will not let that happen. They'll never let that happen because there's too much money to be made in the military-industrial complex that puts billions and billions of dollars into all of their pockets, whether all the way through the House, all the way through the Senate. Surely not every single person in an elected spot in Congress is receiving these types of funds, but I believe the vast majority are. And even after they're long gone, the industrial complex will still have bureaucrats that have been in these positions of power for decades that are waiting to make deals or waiting to continue the policies that they've had in place for forever in the interest of these massive companies, whether it be Raytheon, whether it be Halliburton, whether it be Lockheed, whether it be Boeing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I just say, stop it now. Just stop it now. I hope somebody is willing to make a deal. I'm almost positive Biden is not, but I really hope that somebody is willing to make a deal here, because how many people are we willing to lose? How much money are we willing to spend? How many weapons are we willing to give up? Because all we're doing is depleting our own stockpile here while making a select handful of people filthy, filthy rich. That is all that we're doing. And then I did have another article from the Hill here. I don't remember exactly. Oh, this is what it was. Just a slight update on the war in Ukraine. GOP senators asking Biden to provide Ukraine with missiles needed to win the war. It just goes on to say Tom Cotton and I believe 4 other senators wrote a letter to Biden stating that they needed state-of-the-art missiles. If their end goal is to win the war, sure, they need the missiles, but at what cost? We have to be asking that. At what cost?